Welcome back to the Arise interview. I'm Charles Anyagolu. Now, to that moment in US civil rights history, the removal of one of the largest Confederate statues on public display in America. After a lengthy court battle, cranes finally moved in to dismantle the 18-metre high monument to General Robert E. Lee, which was prominently displayed in the Virginia state capital, Richmond, for 130 years. General Lee was the leader of Confederate forces during the American Civil War in the 1860s. And he was also a native of Virginia, with Richmond once being the capital of the Confederacy. Well, the state Supreme Court ruled in favor of its removal last week, and the state had become the focus of angry protests after the killing of George Floyd. Virginia's governor said honoring a soldier who'd fought to preserve slavery was a burden that Virginia had borne for too many years. But the former US President Donald Trump criticized the removal, saying America's history and heritage were being extinguished by the radical left.
It was a long time coming, part of the healing process for Virginia to move forward, to embrace diversity, to be a welcoming state, to be inclusive, and to let people know that our lights are on and our doors are open. So I want to thank the city of Richmond, the people of Richmond, and people all across the Commonwealth for doing the right thing after 402 years of just history that we should not be proud of. This is a step in the right direction. It's a big day for Virginia.
With the removal of this grandiose monument to a past that no longer represents who we are as a Commonwealth, we can turn the page to a new chapter, a chapter that is full of hope, healing, and inclusion, and one that will tell Virginia's history fully and to tell it truthfully and accurately.
Well, for more on this, I'm joined now from Washington by Melvin P. Foote, CEO for Constituency for Africa, an Africa and African American focused organization. Mr. Foote, delighted to see you again. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. How significant a moment is this with the statue of Robert E. Lee coming down, briefly?
I think it's very significant. This has been a process of Black Lives Matter for a number of years now, and the statue in Richmond, that supported the Confederate general who tried to destroy the country, and you put him up on a pedestal is absolutely absurd. So I'm delighted that this has happened. The governor deserves a great deal of credit in Virginia, and I think it's a message that's going to resonate across the United States.
And for people who don't know the history of the Confederate Army and the links to slavery, tell us about the role of Robert E. Lee. I mean, apart from being the commander of the Confederate Army, what's his connection to racism, slavery, and white supremacy?
Well, America is built on racism. It's built on white supremacy. And the foundation, we killed off the indigenous Indians. We enslaved millions of Africans, and this is how America was built up. And so 200 years later, we find ourselves, a very divided country. Black people over here, white people over there, and there's very little contact and access between them. And so Robert E. Lee really represented the white supremacy of America. And he wanted this country to be a country where blacks were always going to be subservient. And, this is where we are today. And so the struggle for an America that represents all of its people very much continues. And it's going to continue going forward.
And how has the community in Virginia, I mean, I know you're in the tri-state sort of area, Washington, Virginia, Maryland, that sort of thing. How have they in particular, and the US in general, reacted to the removal of the statue, and not just the black community, but also the white population? I mean, just, broadly speaking.
I think it's divided Democrat, Republican. Democrats are ecstatic. We're supporting this. Black people, white people across the country endorse this. I mean, The young people, wonder why are we allowing these statues? Why are we still naming our parks and our schools after the white Confederate generals who lost the war? They were the losers, and yet we put them up on pedestals and honor them. So I think America is divided. The Democrats are supportive of it. The Republicans, espoused by Donald Trump and his people, are against it. So that's where we are, and the struggle continues.
You mentioned Donald Trump there. I mean, he, apart from criticizing the removal of that statue of General Robert E. Lee, he praised General Lee and said America's history and heritage were being extinguished by the radical left. I mean, what's your reaction to that?
Absolutely absurd. Absolutely absurd. And he also told white people that they should not be ashamed of what happened to the Indians. This was America's destiny or something like that. He represents this large white population, 70-something million voted for him, who really are seeing themselves being marginalized as America becomes more diverse. For the first time, according to the current census, white people are a minority in this country for the first time. And so they're frightened. They're frightened that black people and other people of color are going to have retribution on them for all the ills that have been done over the 200 years of this country. And they're frightened of it. They're frightened that white people are going to become less significant and more extinct as the years go ahead, and that's what we're up against. Their vision is that their way of life will end, and it will end. It's just a matter of time. It's going to end. It's going to have to adjust, and it's got to be a new America, a new world, really. And this is what we're looking at, and this is what we're fighting against.
But isn't there something, Mr. Foote, to be said for preserving the history of a country, good or bad? I mean, because obviously when you attempt to erase this sort of history, I mean, it not only deepens the anger of a particular section of society, it simply puts off the argument for another day.
Yeah, I think that's right, but that's why I think we have these beautiful museums, where you go and you study all kinds of things. You just study the Indians. You just you study the Confederacy. You study slavery. We have museums. We have universities. We have all kinds of institutions that allow for that. But it shouldn't be in the public domain. It shouldn't be across from the White House. It shouldn't be under U.S. Congress. It shouldn't be representative of what America is today. It should be in museums.
And of course, this particular statue has become something of a focal point for protesters. A lot of people rallying around it after the killing of George Floyd in Minnesota. For you, Melvin, as an African American who obviously has a lot of relations with Africa and is very strong on your heritage, how this is a moment in civil rights history, is it, for you personally?
Well, I went down there myself a few months ago. I just got in the car and drove down, and it's really in a prominent location in Richmond. I mean, it's not like off the beaten track. It's in a prominent park in Richmond, Virginia. I think it's a statement, going forward. Now, if you ask me, is the problem with black people in this country resolved because of this? Heck no. We have a long way to go. We're really at the beginning of the transformation of the country. But I think that it's definitely a statement. It's definitely a rallying point. And what you saw in Richmond on Wednesday was black people, white people, a lot of young people who are all cheering the statue coming down. And we'll see what's going to go up afterwards. I've heard some understanding that it's going to be a monument to those who were enslaved, as opposed to a monument of the white general who enslaved black people. It's going to be, so it's going to be a transformation point.
Melvin Foote, CEO for Constituency for Africa, I want to thank you very much indeed for joining us today from Washington.